For today's DC Multiverse review, we are looking at, yes, another Batman. And this time it's the Hush 2 version of Batman. But hey, I like Batman, so it's fine with me. But I know some of you are probably tired of the amount of Batman figures that we get from Mcfarlane Toys, but that's just how it's been with this line. It's just endless Batmans. And there's more coming, apparently, from what I've seen of rumored listings. So it's not over. Alright, before I talk about the accessories and the figure, let's take a quick look at the data profile card. As you can see, there is this beautiful comic book artwork of Batman. The source material is from Batman Hush 2, and on the backside of the card, you do have a read-up for who the character is. Since we already know Batman's origin story, I'm not going to read this information because I've actually read this before once in the past with another review, of course, for a Batman figure. So if you want to read this, pause the video now. And there it is. That is the data profile card. Let's move on to the accessories. So just like the original version of the Hush Batman figure that Mcfarlane made a few years ago, he comes with the same sets of accessories. You do get two fist hands, which is nice. And what's interesting is that the hands have like a different sculpt detail that isn't the same between these set of hands. What I mean is that if you look at the fist hands, they have like this sort of like padding sculpted on top right there. It's the same on this side as well. But for his item holding hands, which are pretty much these hands that also look like trigger finger hands as well, you could probably have him hold a gun, but you probably wouldn't want to do that. They don't have that detail. I don't know why that's not sculpted on these hands. It's really strange to see how they're just a flat surface compared to the fist hands actually having this padding detail that is sculpted. But you do get two of these, so you can have them hold two batarangs if you want to. And speaking of batarangs, he does come with the same sets of batarangs like the original version in this sculpt. So there you go. And that is pretty much most of the accessories that he has. The last thing that he comes with, if you want to count it as an accessory, is of course the DC stand. So yeah, you get this as well. All right, that is everything in this box. Let's move on to the aesthetics of this figure now. Taking a closer look at the Hush 2 Batman figure, you may be wondering what is the difference between this version and the prior versions of the Hush Batmans that Mcfarlane has released. And to be honest, outside of the most noticeable change, which is the cloth art cape on this version compared to the plastic capes, most of the figure itself is pretty much near identical, except for one thing that they retooled, which is the upper torso here. I don't know why they retooled it, because it doesn't really improve the articulation. Now, I understand why they did it for the bat emblem, because with most of the emblems, they don't sculpt them anymore like what we see in the past, right? But in terms of the torso, it doesn't really improve on the articulation. So, for example, if you're wondering if you can lean forward, you can't really lean forward at all with the upper torso. It barely even wants to move forward. And then the butterfly joints on the arms, they're just there to fill in for the gaps. They're not even like properly working butterfly joints. So overall, this didn't really fix the articulation issues that existed on the original figure. This basically, I don't know what the retooling here is for. I mean, outside of maybe accommodating for the cloth art cape, because on the prior torso you can see that it was connected to the plastic cape. So that's all I can think of for why they retooled it, and to save them the trouble from actually having to sculpt a bat emblem. And that's pretty much all the differences I can really point out between this new one and the prior one. Now, is this new version worth picking up? I would say yes. If you don't have a Hush Batman in your collection and you don't want to spend like a lot of money on like the Mafex version, this one's actually not a bad version to pick up, because at least it's a little bit more affordable, even though it is skirting around the $30 price tag now because these figures are getting expensive. But I think this is a okay Hush Batman to pick up if you need one for your shelf. And to make it even better, what I like about this version is that the cloth art cape really did fix the one problem I disliked about the original Hush Batman figure. And the version that I'm using for comparisons is not the original release. This is the other color variant that they released after, but it's the same figure. So this black and gray version, as you can see, reused the same cape mold, which is this pre-molded plastic cape. And this cape has a bit of weight to it, which caused the figure to have trouble standing. Now, I was able to adjust him to stand properly, but sometimes he will fall over when I'm not looking. So he'll just like, boom, like that, because the cape itself has a bit of weight to it. So using a cloth wire cape this time around was a smarter option, and I'm glad they weren't lazy. They realized that, oh, if we're gonna re-release the same figure, we might as well change something to make it at least a little bit better, if you want to call this an improvement. And of course, cloth wire cape is always an improvement, but that's the only change that I can see that just makes this figure a little bit better than the prior one. And now let's talk about the aesthetics of this figure overall. So let's start with the head sculpt. This head sculpt is a very nice looking head sculpt, but one thing I very dislike is this head and neck combination. The problem with this is that when you're posing this figure, you can't have him looking up because there is no way for him to look up because everything is connected to the neck peg down here, which isn't great. I don't know why they sculpted his head sculpt this way. It could have been a lot better if they just added a articulation point to the head sculpt and make the neck a separate articulation, which they would never do. That's a double articulation for the head and neck. Or they could have gone the easier way, where usually the neck is just sculpted with the body, and then we just have one articulation point for the head sculpt. But yeah, they didn't want to do that. They were just like, we're just going to reuse the same head sculpt as before to save us the trouble. This could have been the best improvement for this version if they actually changed it up and not kept it the same. That would have made this figure 10 times better in my opinion. That is something I dislike, this neck and head combo. But overall, the head sculpt itself is pretty nice in terms of the overall execution. That is a very good looking Batman head sculpt. Moving down to the suit itself, it is very simplistic. It is the gray and blue suit. You have the bat emblem here, which is different from the other version. As you can see, the bat emblem is not the same in terms of its design. It is still just a bat emblem, but you can see some differences right there. And he does have his arm gauntlets, whatever these are called, with the, these things. They're meant to block the sword hits. He does have his utility belt, which looks very practical. A lot of pouches. It does go all the way to the backside, so they were not lazy. They did wrap it all the way around, right? And then for his legs down here, very simplistic looking legs. They're, of course, the same exact legs as the other version of this figure. So, overall, aesthetics, it's pretty simple. Cloth wire cape. Let's take a look at the back. It's very shiny and blue. I don't mind the shininess of it, but I would prefer if the cape was just like a flat matte finish to the blue here, because it's just way too shiny. I don't know why they like using the shiny colors on the cape, but there it is. That is everything I can really talk about when it comes to aesthetics, because overall it's the same exact figure as the one that came out before. It's just that's a retool and you get a new cloth wire cape. So every other detail that you've seen on the prior version, expect the same with this one. Moving on to the articulation of this figure, let's start with the head-neck combo. As I said, the problem with this combination is that everything is connected to one joint. So if you're wondering, can he look up? No, he cannot, because the neck runs into the back part of the figure, which is this back part right here, and that's as far as the articulation allows the neck to go. Looking down, oh, that's not an issue. Turning his head and neck left and right, he can do. Tilting it side to side, that also works. So the overall articulation is decent, but if you're trying to get him into some dynamic poses, this is going to be a problem for that. Moving down to the arms, he can swing them back and forth with no problems. He can lift them up this much. He has upper bicep swivel. He has double jointed in the arms. They do work. He also has swivel in the hands and wrist articulation. So standard articulation for the arms. For the upper torso here, which has been retooled, how much range of motion does it have? It can rotate pretty well, surprisingly, even though it can't really lean forward. Can it lean back? Okay, he can lean back a little bit. Still not great, because if you are trying to recreate this pose right here, if you can, the problem with that is that you need the head sculpt to be able to look up, which that is the problem here. It can barely look up. So the upper torso can lean back. The weight swivel down here, does it work? Yes, it works a little bit. It rotates. It's really stiff. It doesn't lean forward. It doesn't really lean back either. So there are some limitations overall. But that has been my issue with the Hush Batman figure mold even back then. It just felt very restricted when it comes to certain articulation points. Going down to the legs, before we actually see how far the legs can spread out, does he have upper thigh swivel? Oh, he does. Wow, that works. Okay, so there is a little bit of that, which is great to see, because on most figures, they seem to be very frozen shut. But sometimes, once in a while, we do get some figures where they actually move. So that's great to see that there's movement there. How far can he spread his legs? That is not a bad spread at all. Better than some figures. Can he do a kick? Not the best. But at least you can still get him to at least maybe kick somebody. Actually, let me see how far. Yeah, no, it's not the best. All right. Double jointed legs. So that works. It's quite stiff on my copy, so it's not really going to go back too much. And then for the feet down here, he does have articulation, swivel, and toe articulation. So, overall, the articulation of this figure is okay. It's not the best. You may have to do a good amount of modifications to basically improving the articulation of this guy. You know, if you are somebody that loves doing modifications, this is an easy project for you to do. But if you're someone like me who doesn't have time to do modifications, and I just want a, decent Batman figure to have in the collection to represent this version of the Batman, right? But just keep that in mind, that the range of motion of this figure is going to have a lot of hindrance. And of course, the last articulation point is the cloth guard cape. It does move, right? As you can see, I've been pretty much moving the cape around throughout this whole review. So yeah, it will pose however you want it to. It's not the worst kind of wiring. It's actually the good kind. So there's that to point out. All right, now before we do comparisons, let me show what he looks like holding at least one of the batarangs in his hands. So I'm going to take this hand off. Really easy, you just pull it off. And then I'm going to put this on right here. There we go, there's a click noise. Let's see if he can hold at least one of these batarangs. All right, any? Oh. There you go. It's actually in his hand. Not really. It's going to fall. Oh, it fell off. Okay, there we go. All right, that's what he looks like with the batarang in his hand. Okay, time for comparisons, and then we will wrap up today's review. For the first comparison, here is the new Hush Batman figure next to the previous version, which was in the black and gray color. And as you can see, the noticeable differences between them, of course, are the capes. This is a cloth guard cape, this is a plastic cape, and then the other difference is the torso. So you can see that this is the old torso with the sculpted bat emblem. This is the new torso with the printed bat emblem. But outside of that, everything else between these two figures are exactly identical. The head sculpts are the same, the arms are the same, the legs are the same, and I believe they're also the same height. I think it's just the camera angle looking a little bit weird. But overall, that is pretty much the differences between the two of them. It's just their colors, and I don't have the original one in the blue color. I think the blue on that version was a little bit more teal, so it's not like this blue. And I actually much prefer the blue on this new version than the one that came out a long time ago. So that is the only differences that I can really point out here with this new one, and of course the one that I have prior to this new version. So that is the first comparison. And for the next comparison, here he is next to the Page Punchers Robin that came out back in May. So there you go. You can put these two together if you want to on the shelf. They actually do scale nicely because Batman is a tad bit taller than Robin, but there it is. And for the next comparison, here he is next to Professor Pig. This is another figure I picked up recently, and I will have a review for this guy very soon. I do have a lot to talk about for this one. Probably one of my favorite figures of the year, just because I like the accessories that he has, and this is a very underrated villain in my opinion. And for the last comparison, if he can fit in frame, I don't think he will because he's freaking massive. Here's Godzilla. Yeah, he's not fitting in frame. This is way too big. It's the Godzilla from the Wonder Woman 2-pack. So there you go. There's Godzilla making a little cameo in here. As you can see, he's freaking giant. And I don't know how I'm going to do the review for that 2-pack because I don't have the best setup for this. So this is going to be fun, I suppose. So there's Godzilla. And that is going to wrap up the comparisons for today's review. If you found today's review of the Hush 2 Batman figure informative, do give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, it would be much appreciated. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.